Businesses constantly incur expenses in the course of running their operations. When it comes to paying those expenses, they sometimes pay right away. An example of that would be a credit card charge that would be entered into QuickBooks as an expense. Or they may have an arrangement with a vendor to pay within a certain time period. In that case, they would receive a bill. This bill would get entered into QuickBooks, and it would be paid at a later time. Regardless of whether you enter a bill or an expense into QuickBooks Online, it's important that you approach this process efficiently. If you have previously created a purchase order for your vendor for the items that you now need to make a payment on, then you should not enter the related expense or a bill manually. A much better approach is to convert an existing purchase order reflected in QuickBooks Online into a bill or an expense. This is a superior approach because you don't need to spend time entering all the information manually, and there is less chance of making an error. Let's see how a bill is created from a purchase order in QuickBooks Online. Let's say we received a bill from our vendor Hicks Hardware for materials that we previously ordered from them. Since we have previously submitted a purchase order to this vendor for the materials, the first thing we'll do is locate this purchase order in QuickBooks. To do that, from the left navigation menu, select Expense and then Vendors. On the vendor screen, from the Money bar, select the Purchase Order box. You will then get a list of your purchase orders. Locate the purchase order that you will use to create a bill. On the right side of the line for that purchase order, in the Action column, you will need to select Create a Bill. But before we do that, we should direct our attention to the downward pointing arrow next to where it says Create a Bill. In the beginning of this lesson, we stated that you can turn your purchase order either into a bill or an expense, depending on how the payment will be processed. Well, if you needed to create an expense, rather than a bill from your purchase order, you would click this downward pointing arrow and select Create Expense. Since in our instance, we have an arrangement with the vendor to pay at a later time, we'll select the Create Bill option to create a bill that we receive from our vendor. Notice that because we're creating the bill out of a purchase order, the contact information for this vendor is already pre-filled. Add or adjust terms if needed. Make sure to enter the correct bill date and bill number. Next, we'll transfer the data from the purchase order to our bill. Notice that there is an area on the right that reflects all the open purchase orders. You need to locate the specific purchase order that we're converting to a bill and click Add next to that purchase order. Notice that after we click the Add button next to the purchase order that we're looking to convert, the Item Details section was populated with data. Carefully compare this information to the bill that you received from your vendor. If anything changed, for example, if you're getting billed for the 2 pipes instead of 6 because they only had 2 available to ship, make sure to make the correction. After you've made any necessary corrections, and the total equals the total of the bill that you received, click Save and Close. Well done! You've just converted a purchase order into a bill in QuickBooks Online.